All right, so about 7 years ago, I was at Founder Institute, and I'd go to a bunch of conferences, and I'd run into this little guy that said Brian Wong on his business card, formerly at Dig. I don't know, we just became friends, and one day he comes up to me, he's like, dude, I gotta raise money. I've built this thing. I'm like, okay, and he'll do his little thing. So back then, he didn't have a license, so I remember picking him up at the Caltrain station and taking him to investor meetings. Brian Wong is one of the coolest guys I know, super smart. Come on down, Brian. All right, welcome.
How's it going?
Thanks for making time for us here.
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, let's get up. Come on.
Energy. Yeah. All right.
All right. So Brian, tell us a little bit about your little thing that you used to do. You still do it?
The Bhangra thing or what?
No, you said you wanted to create something and evoke an emotion in people, and you used to do this thing with your hand. Remember that?
Maybe I've gotten a little old, but I don't remember.
You're
Sorry.
Yeah, so when you were pitching Kiip, originally, the original pitch was that there's a moment in which people have this emotion, and if you reward them, it gets them to like you more.
Absolutely.
So tell us a story about Kiip and what you guys are up to, and what's new and good, and
yeah. So I mean, the company is now almost 6 years old. So I think in the startup world, that is like either you're not supposed to be around or you're really old. And I guess what that indicated for us, and by the way, as a company, we're now profitable, we're close to 100 employees, we're gonna do 20 million in revenue this year. Like, there's things that happened over the last 6 years that I never expected would actually happen. But as a business, what I'm so happy about is that our core vision has remained intact. And that is the notion that in these moments of happiness, in these moments when we're on our phones and doing these things that have meaning. So for example, you just finished a run, happens to be your best record, your personal record. That's a great moment, right? You leveled up in a game, that's a great moment. And unfortunately, in the past, in these moments in time, there was a lot of annoying advertising. And it still very much so is the case. And so he said, what could we do with these moments instead of just putting an ad? Why not actually reward you? And so we decided to bring rewards in a very unique way to these things that you're already doing. So today, we're now integrated into 4,000 apps. Apps you may have heard of like Runkeeper, Mint, All Recipes, eHow. And we want to take these things that mean things, moments in time that mean something to people, and create a better experience. There's never, advertisers have always been there to take your attention and kind of remove you from an experience to get you to do something else. We said, why not in that moment actually add to it? How novel is that, right? Like for a brand to add to your experience is like, that's supposed to be groundbreaking. And so that ended up being the model. And so in one line, we kind of describe it very simply. It's, historically with brands and advertising, they would say, hey, I want to find someone who's interested in fitness. So I'm going to go ahead and buy an ad in, Shape magazine or Men's Health. And their theory is, okay, if you're reading fitness content, then most likely you're a fitness enthusiast or you're interested in fitness. And then we ask the question, why not be there the moment someone has just finished running? I mean, that's a lot more direct. It makes a lot more sense. And that, in many ways, has just kind of, in a nugget, explained what we've been doing for the past 6 years.
That's awesome. Mike?
Yeah, there we go. You're good.
Can you hear me? So in these 6 years, going from, hey, I built this cool thing to raising 20-something million dollars, any lessons you've learned? I mean, I'm glad that your vision is still the same, but would you have done anything different?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of folks, you can imagine, are curious in retrospect, what would we have done differently? I would say there's really nothing I would want to change in the path that we took. I think in our current environment and the things that we were doing at the time was the appropriate action. I would say the lessons learned, right, are pretty much around people and around market dynamics. So I'll quickly break those down. In people, it's very simple. I look like I'm 12. I'm fully aware of that. And it's pretty much impossible for me to go into a room and be like, hey, yeah, I know, I'm the experienced one. It just isn't going to happen, right? So I play the whole role of I'm the one who's learning. I'm the one who's, as a CEO, I'm supposed to not dictate to you as a team, but rather enable you. remove obstacles, be the one who offers resources. You do need more people, things like that. And if you happen to hire the right folks, they'll be autonomous enough to take on that directive with resources only and be able to chart their own path. However, you are responsible to set the vision, right? One thing I learned about people as well is in the very early stages, you're very good at bringing on generalists and intrapreneurial folks, very excitable, want to do all sorts of things. And by the way, very appropriately, because you want people to be comfortable with ambiguity. One day you're doing one thing, one day you're doing another. In the later stages, it's a lot more apt to bring in specialists and folks that are really good at being that sharp knife and just cutting, and more efficiently and more intelligently. And what happens, though, is there's a point in that middle where there is a little bit of an exodus or a sort of a turnover period where a lot of these generalists get replaced by the specialists. It's not something that you do as an evil person, but because, to be honest, what happens is the generalists feel like they are being punished by being specialized. Because at some point you have to say, listen, we have to be really good at customer retention, right? And then the generalists will go, well, I was doing all this other stuff. I'm like a free bird, and why am I now doing that? And then naturally, these folks will turn over themselves, and then you'll bring in that specialist. So that was the other data point I learned on the people side. Many more lessons to learn, I'm sure. And the other thing is market dynamics. So some of you may know, but in our industry, which loosely is defined as ad tech, just please know that I don't necessarily view us as that, but from a later stage standpoint, when you look at the market, there's companies that are in that category that sort of look like-ish to us. Cool. But what happens is, in the last couple years, our fellow brothers and sisters as companies in that category have cratered in their valuations, in their multiples, all that. And so when you think about it, you have an environment that's largely unfavorable to the thing that you're doing, but internally, everything's awesome and exciting. So you can imagine the challenges that come with that. But even within 6 short years, there's already a few cycles, right? And that within your own industry, right? From the ad mob excitement to the millennial IPO to the no one gives a fuck anymore, right? So like it's really interesting to see those data points along that path. But then making sure that when you're with your team, it's about windshield versus rear view mirror, right? If I could be more cheesy about it. And you know that if you're determined, the vision is very clear, that there's still a problem that needs to be solved, which is there's not a single normal human being that looks at a banner ad on their phone and goes, ooh, let me intentionally tap on that. That's never happened, right? And because that is still a problem, there still needs to be a solution. I don't care about market dynamics. I care about solving that, and we will continue to do that.
So speaking of that, what's the coolest reward you've given?
I mean, every time, like, we have a lot of really cool rewards. Actually, it's everything from free product that you can redeem. Like, we did a smart water campaign where you could redeem a free smart water at a nearby Walgreens. We actually shipped out an early preview of this new Sour Patch Kids product called Lineups, which is essentially Sour Patch Kids that were connected to each other, and we actually sent those samples. We did a thing, and you're gonna love this. We did a thing that was weather triggered around Slurpee. And it's about to come up, right? So when the weather got hot in your city, I think if it went past like 70 degrees, 7-Eleven would trigger a Slurpee reward. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that we see. And there's stuff that may not seemingly be cool, but has somehow become really cool, which is we actually do this thing with Home Depot, where you're wondering, well, what would you give away from Home Depot? Like free lumber or paint or like nails? I'm like, that's really sexy, right? But what we did with them is they have these workshops. So if you're like a huge Home Depot junkie, which I'm not because I'm really bad at building stuff with my hands, is they have these free workshops that can teach you how to like build a shelf or like whatever. And we went into to-do list apps. And when you were like getting things done, like in a to-do mindset, they rewarded you with an invitation to this workshop. So the workshop was already free, by the way, but people didn't know that was a perk. So there's a lot of things we've learned in the past few years, that things that may not necessarily seem like big value, huge rewards, are actually appealing to people.
What's next?
Well, it's still Kiip.
Within Kiip.
Within Kiip, yeah. What's next is really, it's super exciting. I don't want to just say connected devices. Like how your eyes just roll to the back of your head is like really fast because like everyone says, oh, connected devices and VR are cool. But let me explain tactically what we're doing here. So our whole currency is the moment, right? Things that happen in that moment in time. Doesn't really sound like that's just exclusive to a single type of device, does it? So we started to look at the world of connected devices and realize, oh, like these connected devices have these moments as well. So think about your car when you have that moment where you're like, oh, I'm about to run out of gas. That's a moment, by the way, that your connected car can now respond to in real time. And so we've actually now been powering connected car rewards around, for example, here's a free gas card. You might be running low on fuel yourself. Here's a concession reward, so you can get a bag of chips or whatever it is. So these things are super now relevant, but tied to anything that's connected. So we call it now the connected moments category, where anything, imagine your fridge in the future, not even the future, even now, your fridge can detect if your vegetables are gonna go rotten. In that moment, Whole Foods should be there, right? So we're seeing so many more opportunities now from that whole pool of connected moments.
Will I ever get a reward for doing laundry?
Yeah,
So
100%.
I just saw a company, Foldamate, helps you fold laundry. Most amazing
Wow.
thing I've ever heard in my life.
Wow.
Order one.
That is the most Silicon Valley thing I've ever heard.
Right? Really cool, right?
Yeah, sort of.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
I hate folding laundry. Okay, so we were at Coachella a couple weeks ago, and
Humble brag, Nima.
you and I, it was epic. Guns N' Roses was cool. So we were talking about, and I started a conversation with what's the next $1 trillion market. And so my question is, hypothetically speaking, if Kiip wasn't there, or you weren't working on it, or it crashed and burned,
Sure.
what would you be working on right now?
Well, $1 trillion opportunities, we discussed this. There's two that I'm really fascinated by. Actually, three. I'll quickly go through them. The first is space. Second is redefining business as an entity. Actually, I'll just skip the third for now because I don't think we have a lot of time. So the first is space. I mean, it's very logical, but I think a lot of it is everything from, as crazy as it sounds, mining asteroids and the moon, to just getting shit out there, to in things like suborbital travel that allows people to get to places really fast. And these things will generate so many more opportunities. We're simply scratching the surface. Right. And I think and space is so interesting. I kind of categorize it as domains that are unknown. So, for example, deep sea is also, in my opinion, like space. It is space in that it's a lot of space, but a category that we have barely tackled. I met a woman a few weeks ago who's working on underwater autonomous drones, right? That can go deep sea and go to places where humans and whatever can't do. And these types of things are just opportunities that I get super excited about. Redefining business is really interesting. Like a friend of mine wrote a book recently called The Liquid Enterprise. And what he was essentially saying in this book was that, whether it be the Ubers or the Airbnbs or whatever, like you're starting to see almost a redefinition of the structure of the business as an entity. I'm talking when you're incorporating, when you have employees, assets mean a whole new thing, when you don't even have assets anymore. Assets could even become liabilities like that. And so now you have this questioning of not just the fact that sharing economy might usurp the big juggernauts, like the fact that Airbnb came out of nowhere, sort of, and then Marriott and Hilton are shaking in their shoes, but it's really the fact that the whole entity of how you structure the business has to change. Employees, these massive lawsuits that are going on about what is an employee, these things are decisions that I'm excited to see, which leads to a lot of opportunity. Because now when you think about how to change how a business is actually structured, that alone, because the business entity itself has created trillions upon trillions of dollars of value over the last however many years, when that changes, the next path is going to have another multi-trillion-dollar opportunity as well. And I know I'm being vague about it, but this is everything that goes down from the regulation to the legal structure and framework to looking even at other countries and how they're doing it.
We also talked about ownership, right?
Yeah.
It's not. What did you say? It's not sexy to own a car anymore.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So exactly. Like I was just like thinking the other day. It's like I happen to have a car. I feel like a loser driving it around. How many of you guys have driven somewhere and someone comes up to your window thinking you're their Uber driver? And I'm like, fuck, right? Like that feels really depressing.
Do you drive a Prius?
No, I don't drive a Prius. But and if I don't imagine, like I feel bad for those driving a Prius because that's even worse, right? They're like, And then especially if it's late at night, someone's like, "Are you an Uber driver? Like, take me home." Oh, you're like, "Fuck," yeah.
You should do one of those.
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
the Lyft, Jerry Rice was driving the Lyft.
Probably,
You should do that.
yeah. I
That'd
don't
be
know,
funny.
yeah.
Okay, so you're 25 now, and I'm sure you've seen some pretty crazy stuff. One of the things I've always kind of liked and respected about you is you've got balls, and you walk into a place, like you said, you're kind of the underdog because you look like you're 12. And so from all this, I'm assuming that's where the idea of the book came, the cheat code. So tell us a little bit about the book. I got a chapter that I'm going to send out to you guys. It's called Find Your Superhero. Yeah.
Superpower.
Superpower, yes. So you got to find your ninja skill. But tell us about the book.
So I figured it'd be really relevant to share it with this audience because a lot of us are builders, ideators. We just want to create stuff. And so, and you're probably wondering, Brad, you have a company and everything. Why are you writing a book? And by the way, you're in Silicon Valley. Do you realize no one reads physical books type of thing? And I'm like, okay, put that aside. The idea of codifying some of the things that are floating around in my head I thought was interesting, and I decided to take a little leap. So the book is called The Cheat Code, and the premise of it is that in games you have cheat codes to get ahead, right? And then in life, there are cheat codes. So it's a 71 life cheat codes. And it's actually kind of self-filtering because if you don't know what a cheat code is, you probably shouldn't be reading this book. So it's actually really designed for a group of folks that have been exposed to the video game generation, know about the fact that cheat codes exist. Anyway, so the thing about cheat codes, too, is that they are very reminiscent of life hacks. However, I find life hacks, and I don't know if you feel the same way, more entertaining than practical, right? And you kind of have the whole Tim Ferriss thing going on. You were like, well, I guess Tim can do it because he's awesome and buff and ridiculously cool. I don't know if I could learn Tango in 5 days. And so I'm like, okay, let's do practical cheats that apply to bringing ideas from imagination to reality. And then also how you look at yourself. The whole package of a startup in the beginning is you as well. And so there's things about personal branding and whatnot. So one of the cheats that you guys will all see is about finding your superpower. And the premise of it is, as a cheat, is very simple. There's a point in your life, in your adulthood, where you stop focusing on fixing your weaknesses and focus on honing in on your strengths and sharpening those strengths, right? And for me, I know, as much as it looks like it, I'm terrible at math. And I know that I'm really good at getting people super excited about stuff, right? That's literally all I do. And so that became the strength that I was like, okay, that's my superpower, and that will be my MO for everything that I do, from investors to potential investors to employees to potential employees to customers to potential customers. It's all about using that.
I'm excited to see you talking about it.
Yeah, I'm like, just get excited. This is exciting shit, right? It's just like, let's figure out how to energize people and make it feel like all the mental barriers that you put up, just floats away. So another thing that is in there is literally stop over coffeeing. What does that mean? Not stop drinking so much coffee. But I think a lot of you have experienced this where I'll get a lot of people who might email me, every other day, or they're like, Brian, I want to grab coffee with you. I want to pick your brain about this startup idea. I'm like, the time you're going to spend grabbing coffee with me is time you should be building shit, right? And the thing is, people try to build too much data in their head about, I need advice on this and that, and then it'll make me feel more comfortable. It's more therapeutic, right? They're using me as a therapy session rather than actually building their shit. So it's like, stop using other people as therapy sessions and go build it. You're building it as therapy, right? Getting your hands dirty is therapy. Asking people for data points is not going to help you. So those are just a few of them, and I think it's really interesting, just from the book aside, this has never been a better opportunity for you to build, and we're the most enabled generation, and I'll leave with this because I don't think we have a lot of time left, which is, my mom and dad immigrated from Hong Kong. They took on jobs. My mom is a nurse. My dad is an accountant. I asked them why they chose to take those jobs because, to be honest, those are very stable, seemingly, boring type of jobs. And so they're like, that's the reason why we took them. Because we wanted to be stable so that you could grow up in a stable environment. And so I'm like, and then I asked the question, did your parents take on these jobs and immigrate here to have a stable environment for you to grow up in, for you to go ahead and then take on another stable job and be a lawyer and be boring again? No offense to lawyers, I'm sorry. No, the answer is no. They did that so that you go out and do crazy shit. Right? And so, yes. And so that's the whole point of this book is go out and do crazy shit. And one of the other cheats is, and I'm trying to give away the entire book, but is ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And that's a very tactical tip and cheat for you to use when you're assessing risk because, okay, the worst that could happen is, Okay, you end up going back home and you move back in your parents' place and you get to sleep in your own bed again and you get laundry done for you and you get food cooked for you. That's the worst that could happen? Then why aren't you doing it? Right? So that's sort of, the way that I want to frame this thinking. And I think we are so fortunate to be in this environment. And I'm excited to see what all of you get to build.
Awesome. Do we want to do a couple questions for Brian? Do we have time? Microphones?
We have 1 minute,
1 minute
to do.
Who has a question? Yell
one
it out.
question. What your question is how to. Oh. Oh, I see. 100%. We reach out to specialists in those industries all the time, and keep in mind a lot of the things that I'm mentioning, there's certain things that have to happen from like reality standpoint when it comes to like health, when it comes to education. There's things you just can't fuck with, right? So I totally understand. And I think, for example, we've actually integrated our technology into a few apps that university researchers are using for adherence, for example, which is the term for do you take your drugs all the time and on time, and rewarding people for doing that. And that's been one of the areas that we would reach out to someone like you to understand more of. So I wouldn't discount specialized knowledge, and I would actually recognize, though, and this is more of a Gary Vee quote, that there's always going to be someone who's going to be trying to disrupt themselves or putting themselves out of business. And I think there's certain aspects of these categories that we've been so used to a certain way of doing things, and we have to actually look at the symptoms of what is typically a larger problem. I'm not going to tackle the entire medical industry as a whole, but for example, one of the aspects that's been brought up is it's very reactive. It's very, okay, we'll prescribe, we'll react once some symptoms have occurred, but preempting these things and preventing these things is very key. And that alone as an insight can build so many more businesses out of it. Like even genomic sequencing has something to do with that, because then we know what potential diseases we may be prone to so that we can prevent those in the first place. But I think those of you who are in those categories, fear not, there's a lot of opportunity, and in fact even more, and leverage what you have rather than trying to move to some other industry just because it seems sexy.
It's funny, my mom's a nurse too. Hi, Mom. She always gives me like funny ideas about nurses and cool tech. She even knew who Brian Wong was today. That was kind of cool.
Well, really quickly, the thing about nurses too is that you have things as skills that apply that you can leverage when you go into tech or do something in tech, right? And just random thing, like it's because of my mom that I learned how to speed walk, by the way, because she was an ER nurse. Yeah, and you can't run. You have to walk really fucking fast. So my mom will always walk, and I'm shorter, right? And I'm a little kid, I'm like, ah! And it's like, and that's how I learned how to walk really fast. So now people try to walk with me, dude, why you walk so fast? Because my mom taught me how to. Yeah.
All right, one more question, and then we've got to cut this thing off. One more question. All right, here we go. In the front.
So I think it's the Tinderization for everything. So essentially, I have this vision of doing like sorting my email via, it's really lame as an idea, but it's sorting my email like a Tinder fashion, like very binary. I think that UI, that UX is very valuable as a mobile first way to interact with content. So I would love to just be like, swipe here to send to someone or forward to someone, swipe this to archive, all this stuff. For some reason, there's an app called iTriage that was built for this, but it kind of blows and it hasn't been updated for 3 years. I think we should bring this in and make it all apply it to productivity. But I think the binary sort of interaction with content is a very fascinating thing.
Awesome. Brian, I have a little gift for you. So these shoes are made out of recycled nets that were found on the beaches of Italy because they're trapping small fish, so they're banned. So these are for you.
Thank you.
They're outside in the booth. We have a break now, so go check out some of the exhibitors, really cool stuff. And then when you get back, Edith from 500 Startups is going to be here. Brian, again, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thanks, dude. Thank you.